The billionaire CEO waited in the lobby every day, but the shy assistant never noticed his gaze. She never knew that someone was watching her every single day. Sofia Martinez clutched her worn leather messenger bag tighter as she stepped through the revolving glass doors of the Meridian Tower in downtown Miami. At exactly 7:47 a.m., just like every morning for the past 8 months, her weathered sneakers squeaked softly against the polished marble floor of the lobby. Her long, wavy black hair cascaded over her shoulder, creating a natural curtain that shielded her face from the world. The lobby buzzed with the usual morning chaos, executives in tailored suits rushing toward elevators, their expensive shoes clicking against the floor like a symphony of ambition. Sofia kept her head down, her expressive brown eyes focused on the worn tiles beneath her feet. She didn't belong in this world of power lunches and corner offices, and she knew it. What she didn't know was that 36 floors above her, Alexander Hayes had been standing by his office window for the past 3 months, watching for that exact moment when her silhouette would appear through the glass doors below. Alexander pressed his palm against the cool window of his penthouse office, his steel gray eyes tracking the familiar figure crossing the lobby. As the CEO of Hayes Urban Innovation, he commanded billion-dollar deals with the composure of a man who had never known failure. But watching Sofia Martinez walk through his building had become the most important part of his day. "Mr. Hayes?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The Tokyo investors are online too. Tell them I'll call back in 5 minutes." Alexander replied, never taking his eyes off the lobby below. He watched as Sofia approached the service elevator, the one reserved for maintenance staff and cleaning crews. Her movements were graceful despite the weight she seemed to carry, not just in her bag, but in the gentle slope of her shoulders. There was something about the way she moved through the world, quietly, almost apologetically, that made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. Down in the lobby, Sofia pressed the worn button for the service elevator and shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Her bronze skin caught the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a brief moment, she glanced up toward the upper floors of the building. Alexander's breath caught in his throat even though he knew she couldn't possibly see him from that distance. The elevator doors opened with a tired ding, and Sofia stepped inside, disappearing from view. Alexander remained at the window for another moment, a habit he'd developed without quite understanding why. Every morning, he found himself wondering about her story. What thoughts occupied her mind during that quiet elevator ride? What made her smile? What made those beautiful brown eyes carry such a heavy sadness? "Sir?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom again, more insistent this time. "The investors are getting impatient." Alexander straightened his charcoal suit jacket and returned to his desk, but his mind remained in that service elevator, wondering about a woman whose name he didn't even know. He'd built an empire on decisive action and calculated risks, yet he'd spent 3 months paralyzed by the simple desire to say hello to someone. Meanwhile, 40 floors below in the building's basement, Sofia was changing into her work uniform, a simple gray polo shirt and matching pants that hung loose on her petite frame. She tied her long black hair into a low ponytail and pulled on rubber gloves, preparing for another day of invisible labor in a world that barely acknowledged her existence. As she gathered her cleaning supplies from the storage closet, her phone buzzed with a text from her younger sister. "Rent's due tomorrow. Do you have it?" Sofia closed her eyes and took a deep breath, her chest tightening with familiar anxiety. She typed back quickly, "Don't worry, I've got it covered." But as she stared at her bank account balance on the phone screen, the numbers told a different story. She had exactly $47 to her name, and rent was $850. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and picked up her cleaning cart, wheels squeaking as she pushed it toward the freight elevator. Another day, another small miracle needed. What she didn't know was that the man who could solve all her problems had been hoping for just one small miracle of his own, the courage to finally speak to her. Sometimes fate has a way of trapping you exactly where you need to be. The morning rain drummed against the windows of Meridian Tower like an impatient symphony, and Sofia Martinez was already running late. She'd spent the night at Miami General Hospital with her 12-year-old sister Isabella, who'd spiked a fever that sent them both into a panic. Between the medical bills she couldn't afford and the job she couldn't lose, Sofia felt like she was drowning in shallow water. Her wet sneakers left small puddles on the marble floor as she hurried through the lobby at 8:23 a.m., 36 minutes later than usual. Her long black hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and exhaustion painted dark circles under her expressive brown eyes. She jabbed the service elevator button repeatedly, as if urgency alone could make it arrive faster. 36 floors above, Alexander Hayes stood at his window, with his morning coffee growing cold in his hands. For 3 months he had synchronized his schedule around 7:47 a.m., the exact moment when Sophia would cross his lobby. But today, his window showed only empty marble and rushing executives. "She's not coming," he murmured to himself, surprised by how much the thought unsettled him. "Who's not coming, sir?" asked Jameson, his assistant, entering with a stack of contracts. "No one," Alexander replied quickly, turning away from the window. "Schedule the board meeting for 10. And cancel lunch with the Peterson group." But even as he tried to focus on quarterly reports, his eyes kept drifting back to the lobby below. Down in the basement, Sophia finally arrived at the service elevator, her heart pounding from both the run and the anxiety that had become her constant companion. As the tired doors opened, she stepped inside and pressed the button for the 5th floor, her first cleaning assignment of the day. The elevator lurched upward with its familiar mechanical groan, but somewhere between the 3rd and 4th floors it shuddered to a complete stop. "No, no, no," Sophia whispered, pressing buttons frantically. The overhead light flickered once, then went out entirely, leaving her in near darkness with only the emergency lighting casting eerie shadows on the walls. She took a deep breath, fighting back the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. Isabella was counting on her. The rent was due tomorrow. She couldn't afford to be trapped in an elevator when she should be working. Meanwhile, Alexander had finally given up his window vigil and decided to check on the building's maintenance issues that had been reported overnight. He rarely used the service elevators. His private elevator went directly to the penthouse, but today felt different. Maybe he needed to understand how the other half of his building lived. He pressed the call button for the service elevator on the 15th floor, planning to ride down and speak with building management about the reported electrical problems. When the doors opened, he expected to find an empty car. Instead, he found her. Sophia was sitting on the floor of the stalled elevator, her knees drawn up to her chest, her face buried in her hands. Her messenger bag lay beside her, and in the dim emergency lighting, Alexander could see her shoulders trembling slightly. "Oh," she gasped, looking up with startled brown eyes as the doors opened. "I'm sorry, sir, the elevator's broken. You should take the main one. Are you all right?" Alexander stepped into the elevator without hesitation, and the doors closed behind him with a soft thud. Sophia scrambled to her feet, smoothing down her gray work uniform. "Yes, sir. I mean, Mr. Hayes. I recognize you from the company photos. I'm so sorry you're stuck with me. I was just—" "You know who I am?" She nodded, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Everyone knows who you are. You probably have important meetings. Not as important as making sure you're okay." Alexander pressed the emergency call button, but got only static in response. "How long have you been stuck?" "About 20 minutes. Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper. "I tried calling for help, but my phone has no signal." Alexander noticed the way she kept her distance, pressed against the far wall of the elevator as if trying to make herself invisible. In the soft emergency lighting, he could see her more clearly than he ever had from his office window. Her natural beauty was even more striking up close. The gentle curve of her face, the way her dark eyelashes cast shadows on her bronze skin, the quiet strength in her posture despite her obvious distress. "I'm Alexander," he said gently, as if they were meeting at a coffee shop instead of trapped between floors. "And you are?" "Sophia Martinez," she replied, then quickly added, "I work in building maintenance, cleaning services." "I know," he said softly. Her brown eyes widened in surprise. "You do?" Alexander realized he'd revealed more than he intended. He couldn't tell her that he'd been watching her every morning for 3 months, that her daily presence had become the highlight of his routine, that he'd started arriving at the office early just to catch a glimpse of her crossing the lobby. The elevator suddenly lurched and Sophia stumbled forward. Alexander instinctively reached out to steady her, his hands gently gripping her shoulders. For a moment they stood close enough that he could smell the faint scent of vanilla in her hair, could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, not moving away immediately. Neither of them spoke for a moment, the air between them charged with something neither had expected. Then Sophia seemed to remember who she was and who he was, and she stepped back quickly. "This is so embarrassing," she said, wrapping her arms around herself. "The CEO of the company, stuck in a broken elevator with the cleaning lady." "Hey," Alexander's voice was gentle but firm. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make yourself small. You're not just anything." Sophia looked at him with those expressive brown eyes as if trying to determine whether he was being sincere or just polite. What she saw in his face made her breath catch in her throat. And in that moment, trapped between floors in a broken elevator, something shifted between them, something that would change both their worlds forever. The truth has a way of surfacing when you're trapped with nowhere to hide. 20 minutes had passed since the elevator doors closed, trapping Alexander Hayes and Sofia Martinez in a space no bigger than a small closet. The emergency lighting cast long shadows on the walls, and the silence between them had grown comfortable in a way that surprised them both. Sofia sat cross-legged on the floor, her back against the wall, while Alexander had loosened his tie and settled across from her. For a man who commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, he looked remarkably at peace, sitting on the floor of a broken elevator. "You said you knew who I was," Sofia said quietly, breaking the silence. "But I don't understand how. I mean, I'm invisible here. I clean offices after everyone goes home, empty trash cans, vacuum carpets. Most people look right through me." Alexander studied her face in the dim light. "You're not invisible to me." "What do you mean?" He hesitated, knowing that his next words would either sound romantic or stalkerish, and the difference lay entirely in his delivery. "I've seen you. Every morning. For the past 3 months." Sophia's brown eyes widened. "You have?" "I have this ritual, I guess. I stand at my office window around 7:47 a.m., and I watch you cross the lobby. You always carry that same messenger bag, and you never look up. Your hair moves differently depending on whether you're running late or not. When you're stressed, you walk faster and your shoulders get tense. You've been watching me for 3 months?" There was no accusation in her voice, only wonder. "I know how that sounds," Alexander said quickly, "but it wasn't creepy or... I just found myself looking forward to seeing you. You became part of my day without even knowing it." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because I'm the CEO and you're..." He stopped himself, realizing how his words might sound. "Because I'm the cleaning lady," she finished for him. "Because I didn't want to make you uncomfortable. Because I didn't know if you were married or happy, or if the last thing you needed was some guy in a suit bothering you." Alexander ran his hand through his dark hair. "Because I haven't felt this nervous about talking to someone since I was 14. Despite everything, Sophia smiled. The first real smile Alexander had ever seen from her. It transformed her entire face, making her eyes sparkle even in the emergency lighting. "I'm not married," she said softly. "Good to know," Alexander replied, and they both laughed, a sound that seemed impossibly bright in their dark, confined space. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said. "Anything. What's it like? Having all that power, all that money? Does it make you happy?" Alexander was quiet for so long that Sophia wondered if she'd overstepped. Finally, he spoke. "Honestly, it's lonely. I have everything I thought I wanted when I was growing up poor in Detroit. The penthouse, the cars, the respect. But at the end of the day, I go home to an empty apartment and eat takeout while reviewing contracts. I haven't had a real conversation with anyone in... I can't remember how long." "That sounds awful," Sophia said with genuine sympathy. "What about you? What's your story, Sofia Martinez?" She pulled her knees closer to her chest. "My story isn't very interesting. I work 3 jobs. Cleaning here, waitressing at a diner on weekends, and I take care of my little sister Isabella. She's 12 and she's everything to me." 3 jobs, that's incredible." "It's survival," Sophia corrected. "Our parents died in a car accident when Isabella was 6. I was 18, fresh out of high school, and suddenly I'm responsible for this little kid. I had to drop out of community college because I couldn't afford it and take care of her at the same time." Alexander felt something twist in his chest. That must have been terrifying. "It was. I had no idea what I was doing. Still don't most days." Sophia's voice grew softer. "She's sick right now. That's why I was late today. Spent the night at the hospital. The doctors say it's just a virus, but when you don't have insurance..." "Every doctor visit is a financial crisis," Alexander finished. "Exactly." Sophia looked at him with surprise. "Most people don't understand that. I grew up without much. My mom worked 2 jobs just to keep us fed. I remember being 8 years old and pretending I wasn't hungry so she could eat." Alexander's voice carried the weight of old memories. "Money doesn't solve every problem, but it sure as hell solves the ones that keep you awake at night." They sat in comfortable silence again, both lost in their own thoughts. Then Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message. The screen illuminated her face as she read it, and Alexander watched her expression crumble. "What is it?" he asked gently. My landlord. He's threatening eviction if I don't have rent money by tomorrow morning. Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. I've been juggling bills, trying to keep everything afloat, but Isabella's medical expenses last month. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Alexander felt an overwhelming urge to fix everything for her right there in that elevator. He could write a check that would solve her immediate problems without him even noticing the money missing from his account. But something in her posture, the proud set of her shoulders even in distress, told him that offering money would be the fastest way to end whatever was beginning between them. I'm sorry, he said instead. That's a terrible position to be in. I'll figure something out. I always do. But for the first time since he'd known her, even from a distance, Sophia's voice carried doubt. The elevator suddenly lurched again, and the lights flickered back on. The mechanical whir of the motor indicated that they were moving again. Looks like we're rescued, Alexander said, though he found himself oddly disappointed that their time together was ending. As the elevator climbed toward the 5th floor where Sophia had originally been headed, she gathered her messenger bag and prepared to return to her invisible life of cleaning and worrying and surviving. The doors opened with their familiar ding. Sophia, Alexander said as she stepped toward the exit. She turned back to look at him, her brown eyes meeting his for the first time without reservation. This conversation, it meant something to me. You mean something to me. Sophia's cheeks flushed pink, and she smiled that transformative smile again. It meant something to me too. As the elevator doors closed between them, Alexander realized that everything had changed. He couldn't go back to watching her from his window, couldn't pretend that she was just a pleasant part of his morning routine. And somewhere between the 3rd and 4th floors, in the darkness of a broken elevator, he'd fallen completely and irreversibly in love with a woman whose rent was due tomorrow. Some gestures are so small they change everything, and so quiet they speak louder than words. Sophia Martinez spent the rest of that Tuesday in a daze, mechanically cleaning offices while replaying every moment of her conversation with Alexander Hayes. Her hands moved automatically, wiping down conference tables, emptying trash bins, vacuuming carpets, but her mind remained trapped in that elevator, hearing his voice say, "You mean something to me." By 6 p.m., when her shift ended, reality came crashing back. She had 12 hours to come up with $850 for rent, or she and Isabella would be on the street. The evening diner shift at Rosie's all-night cafe would bring in maybe $60 in tips if she was lucky. She did the math in her head as she changed out of her work uniform. Not even close. Walking through the lobby toward the exit, Sophia kept her eyes down as usual, but this time it wasn't from habit. It was from shame. How could she face Alexander again, knowing that he'd seen her at her most vulnerable? A CEO probably couldn't even imagine what it felt like to choose between groceries and electricity. She was almost to the revolving doors when something caught her eye. There, on the marble ledge beside the security desk where she passed every single day, sat a small white envelope with her name written in elegant handwriting. Sophia. Her heart hammered as she looked around the lobby. A few late-working executives hurried past, but none paid her any attention. She picked up the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a simple note written on expensive paper. Sophia, our conversation today reminded me that the best part of any day is when something unexpected happens that makes you see the world differently. You did that for me. I hope tomorrow brings you everything you need. Alexander P.S. Check the coffee shop on the corner of Biscayne and 5th. Ask for Maria. She has something for you. Sophia read the note 3 times, her brown eyes filling with tears she couldn't quite explain. No one had written her a note since elementary school. No one ever left her anything except work assignments and bills. The coffee shop, Cafe Luna, was a 10-minute walk from Meridian Tower. Sophia had passed it countless times but never gone inside. $20 smoothies and artisanal pastries weren't in her budget. The warm lighting and the laughter spilling out onto the sidewalk had always seemed like it belonged to someone else's life. When she pushed open the glass door, a bell chimed softly overhead. The smell of fresh coffee and baking bread enveloped her like a hug. Behind the counter, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun looked up from the espresso machine. "Are you Maria?" Sophia asked hesitantly. "Si, that's me. And you must be Sophia." Maria's face broke into a warm smile. "I've been waiting for you. I don't understand. Come, come." Maria gestured for Sophia to follow her to a quiet corner of the cafe. "Sit down, mija. Can I get you something? Coffee? Something to eat? You look like you haven't eaten today." Sophia realized Maria was right. She'd been too anxious about rent to think about food. "I can't afford." Did I ask if you could afford it? Maria's tone was gentle but firm. Sit. As Sophia settled into a worn leather chair, Maria bustled around, returning with a steaming mug of café con leche and a plate of warm pastries. My abuela's recipe, she said, settling into the chair across from Sophia. Now, let me tell you why you're here. This is about Alexander Hayes, isn't it? Sophia asked quietly. That boy has been coming here every morning for 3 months, ordering the same black coffee, sitting at that table by the window. Maria pointed to a small table with a view of the street. Always checking his watch, always looking toward that big building where you work. Finally, this afternoon he comes in looking like a man who'd found something he'd lost. Sophia felt her cheeks warm. He told you about me? He told me about a woman who works harder than anyone should have to, who takes care of her little sister, who's facing some trouble she doesn't deserve. Maria's voice was filled with maternal warmth. He asked me if I needed help here. Night shift, he said. Someone reliable and hardworking. Sophia's heart stopped. A job? 3 nights a week, 8 p.m. to 2 a.m., preparing for the morning rush, cleaning, some light baking if you're interested in learning. Pays $15 an hour, plus tips from the evening customers. Maria paused. And I happen to need someone who can start immediately. Tonight, if you're willing. The numbers raced through Sophia's mind. 3 nights a week, 6 hours each night, $15 an hour. That was $270 a week. Combined with her other jobs, it would be enough. More than enough. Why would he do this? Sophia whispered, tears threatening to spill over. Because sometimes we meet people who remind us what kindness looks like, Maria said gently, and sometimes we're in a position to pass that kindness along. I don't want charity. Mija, this isn't charity. I really do need help. I'm 63 years old and these old bones don't like staying up all night anymore. Maria reached across the table and took Sophia's hands. Besides, Alexander didn't pay me anything. He just made an introduction. The job is yours if you want it, but you'll earn every penny. Sophia looked around the cozy cafe, at the mismatched furniture, the local artwork on the walls, the steady stream of customers who seemed to treat the place like a second home. For the first time in years, she could imagine herself somewhere that felt like belonging instead of just surviving. I'd like to try, she said softly. Bueno, then let's get you an apron. As Maria showed her around the kitchen, explaining the routines and introducing her to the evening shift, Sophia felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Hope, not the desperate, clinging to anything hope she'd carried for years, but real, solid hope, based on possibility and kindness. Her phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. How did your day go? Are we going to be okay? For the first time in months, Sophia could text back honestly. Yes, baby girl. We're going to be more than okay. But as she tied her new apron around her waist and began learning how to work the industrial coffee machine, one question burned in her mind. How was she supposed to thank a man who had just changed her life without making her feel like a charity case? And more importantly, what did it mean that a billionaire CEO was paying attention to her life closely enough to know exactly what kind of help she needed? She folded Alexander's note carefully and slipped it into her pocket, where it would stay close to her heart for reasons she wasn't quite ready to examine. The hardest conversations happen when you finally have something to lose. 3 weeks had passed since Sofia Martinez started working at Café Luna, and for the first time in years, she wasn't calculating grocery money versus bus fare in her head. The night shift had become her sanctuary, the quiet rhythm of preparing pastries, the gentle hum of conversation from evening customers, and Maria's motherly presence made even the 2 a.m. closing feel peaceful. But every morning at 7:47 a.m., as she crossed the lobby of Meridian Tower to start her cleaning shift, Sophia found herself looking up toward the 36th floor, wondering if Alexander Hayes was still watching from his window. They hadn't spoken since the elevator, though she'd written and rewritten thank you notes a dozen times, never finding words that felt adequate for what he'd done. This particular Thursday morning, everything changed. Sophia, a familiar voice called her name as she approached the service elevator. She turned to find Alexander walking toward her across the marble lobby, and her heart did something complicated against her ribs. He looked different somehow, less polished, more human. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and he carried his suit jacket over his arm instead of wearing it. Hi, she said softly, tucking a strand of black hair behind her ear. Hi. They stood there for a moment, two people who had shared something profound in a broken elevator and then returned to their separate worlds. How are you? I mean, really, how are things? Better, Sophia said, and for the first time, she meant it completely. So much better. Thank you. You don't need to thank me. Maria told me you're a natural. She said you make the best café con leche she's tasted since her grandmother died. Sophia smiled, that radiant expression that had haunted Alexander's thoughts for weeks. She's been teaching me her family recipes. I never knew I liked cooking until I had a real kitchen to work in. I'm glad. Alexander shifted his weight, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Actually, I was wondering, would you maybe want to have coffee sometime? I mean, I know you work around coffee all night, so maybe that's the last thing you want, but I'd like that. Sophia interrupted gently. Really? Really? They were making plans to meet at a small diner near Sophia's apartment when Alexander's assistant Jameson appeared at his elbow, slightly out of breath from hurrying across the lobby. Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the Westbrook Industries Board is here early. They're waiting in conference room A. Alexander's jaw tightened. Tell them I'll be right there. Sir, they seem agitated. Something about the Henderson merger falling through. As Jameson hurried away, Alexander turned back to Sophia with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry, I have to go, Sophia said quickly. It's okay. Business comes first. Something in her tone made Alexander pause. Sophia, this isn't about business coming first, this is just terrible timing. But she was already backing toward the service elevator, her walls going back up with familiar efficiency. It's fine, Mr. Hayes. Really, thank you again for everything. Don't do that, he said, stepping closer. Don't call me Mr. Hayes and disappear on me. I'm not disappearing, I'm just going to work, like I'm supposed to. The service elevator doors opened, and Sophia stepped inside. As they began to close, Alexander caught them with his hand. Sophia, please, don't let them change this. Let who change what? The people upstairs, the board meetings and the pressure and all the noise that comes with what I do for a living. Don't let it make you think that what's happening between us isn't real. Sophia looked at him with those expressive brown eyes, and Alexander could see the exact moment she made her decision to trust him again. Tomorrow, she said. 7 p.m. Rosie's all-night cafe on Flagler Street. Best coffee in Miami, and they don't care if you sit there for 3 hours talking. Tomorrow, Alexander agreed, stepping back as the elevator doors closed. But as the day wore on, Alexander found himself trapped in an endless cycle of emergency meetings. The Henderson merger, a deal worth $200 million, was collapsing, and 3 other major contracts were suddenly in jeopardy. By evening, his desk was covered with legal documents and his phone hadn't stopped ringing. At 6:30 p.m. he was still in his office, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, trying to salvage deals that seemed determined to fall apart. Through his window, he could see the lights of the city beginning to twinkle, and somewhere out there Sophia was probably getting ready for their coffee date. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's Sophia. Maria gave me your number. Still on for 7? Alexander stared at the message, then at the stack of contracts on his desk, then at his phone again. 3 of his biggest clients were threatening to walk away. His legal team was demanding answers he didn't have. And in 30 minutes, the most important person in his world would be sitting in a diner, waiting for him. He texted back. Something came up at work. Rain check? The response came immediately. Of course, I understand. But Alexander could feel the disappointment in those 3 words. Could imagine the way Sophia's face must have fallen when she read his message. This was exactly what she'd expected. That business would always come first, that she would always come second to whatever crisis demanded his attention. At 8:15 p.m., his assistant knocked on his office door. Mr. Hayes, I'm heading home. Do you need anything else tonight? Jameson? Alexander said suddenly. What would you do if you had a choice between saving your job or keeping a promise to someone you care about? Jameson looked surprised by the personal question. I guess I'd ask myself which one I could live without. After Jameson left, Alexander sat alone in his office, looking down at the city lights, and thinking about a woman with black hair and brown eyes who worked 3 jobs and deserved someone who showed up when he said he would. At 8:45 p.m., he grabbed his keys and left the contracts on his desk. Rosie's all-night cafe was exactly what its name promised. A small, brightly lit diner that looked like it had been serving coffee and comfort food since the 1950s. When Alexander walked through the door, he found Sophia sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee and a book, her long hair falling in waves over her shoulder. She looked up as he approached, surprise and something else, relief, flickering across her face. You came, she said softly. I'm sorry I'm late. I should have been here an hour ago. You're here now. Sophia said, closing her book and gesturing to the seat across from her. That's what matters. As Alexander slid into the booth, he realized that she was right. Nothing that had happened in his office tonight was as important as this moment. Sitting across from a woman who had somehow become the center of his world, without him even realizing it was happening. So, Sophia said, pouring him coffee from the pot on the table, tell me about your day, and don't leave out the part where you chose me over whatever crisis was keeping you at the office. Sometimes the scariest thing about falling in love is realizing you deserve to be caught. The coffee at Rosie's all-night cafe was exactly as Sophia had promised. Strong, honest, and served in thick white mugs that had probably been there since the Carter administration. Alexander wrapped his hands around his cup, still processing the fact that he'd walked away from the biggest professional crisis of his career, to sit in a fluorescent-lit diner with a woman who made his chest feel light and heavy at the same time. You really want to hear about my day? He asked, studying Sophia's face in the harsh lighting. Somehow, even under the unforgiving fluorescence, she looked beautiful. I want to hear about the part where you chose me, she said simply, her brown eyes holding his gaze steadily. Alexander felt something shift inside him. No one's ever asked me to choose them before, maybe because no one ever needed to. When you have everything, people usually just wait for whatever time you can spare them. Is that what you think? That I have everything? Sophia tilted her head, considering. Don't you? I have money. I have power. I have a penthouse apartment with a view of the ocean that cost more than most people make in 10 years. Alexander paused, turning his coffee mug in his hands. But I eat dinner alone every night. I haven't called my mother in 3 months because I'm afraid she'll ask how I'm doing and I won't know how to answer. And before 3 weeks ago, the highlight of my day was watching a woman cross my lobby because she was the only real thing in my carefully constructed world. Sophia felt her breath catch. Alexander, you asked me to tell you about choosing you over the crisis at work, but the truth is, it wasn't really a choice. Sitting here with you is the only thing that's felt right in months. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of his honesty settling between them. Through the window, Miami's nighttime traffic hummed past, and the diner's ancient jukebox played something soft and scratchy from the 70s. Can I ask you something? Sophia said finally. Anything. That morning in the elevator, when you said you'd been watching me for 3 months, was that the first time you'd really seen me? I mean, really noticed that I existed? Alexander considered lying, giving her the comfortable answer that would make her feel special without making him vulnerable. But something about the fluorescent lights and the honest coffee and the way she looked at him like he was just a man instead of a CEO made him choose truth instead. No, he said quietly. I noticed you the first day you started working at Meridian Tower, 8 months ago. Sophia's eyes widened. 8 months. You were carrying that same messenger bag, wearing jeans that were too big for you and sneakers that had seen better days. Your hair was longer then, and you kept tucking it behind your ear when you were nervous. You asked the security guard where the service elevator was, and when he pointed, you said, "Thank you," like he'd just given you directions to treasure. You remember all that? I remember thinking that you were the most naturally beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and that you had no idea. I remember wondering what your story was. What made you duck your head when people looked at you? What put that sadness in your eyes? Sophia felt tears threatening. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I was a coward, Alexander admitted. Because I convinced myself that watching you from a distance was enough. Because I was terrified that if I actually talked to you, I'd discover that you were just as perfect as I imagined, and then I'd be completely lost. And now? Now I'm completely lost anyway. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and raw, and terrifying. Sophia reached across the table and covered his hand with hers, the first time she'd touched him intentionally since that moment in the elevator. I have to tell you something, she said softly, about why I work so hard to be invisible. Alexander turned his hand palm up, intertwining their fingers. You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share. But I want to. You've been honest with me and I want to be honest with you. Sophia took a deep breath. When Isabella and I lost our parents, I was 18 and completely alone. The state wanted to put her in foster care because they didn't think I could take care of her. I had to prove I was responsible, stable, capable. I learned to be quiet, to not cause problems, to make myself small so that no one would look too closely at our situation. Sophia, I got so good at being invisible that I forgot how to be seen. I forgot that I might deserve to take up space in the world, that I might be worth someone's attention. She looked down at their joined hands. When you said I meant something to you, It was the first time in years that someone saw me as more than just a function. The cleaning lady, the waitress, the sister. You're so much more than any of those things. I'm starting to believe that, Sophia said. And when she looked up at him, her brown eyes were bright with unshed tears. You make me feel like I'm worth seeing. Alexander brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. You are worth seeing. You're worth everything. Even a billionaire CEO walking away from the biggest crisis of his career? Especially that. They talked until the diner's late-night crowd began to thin out, sharing stories about childhood dreams and adult disappointments, about the weight of responsibility and the courage it takes to hope for something better. When Alexander finally walked Sophia to the bus stop outside her apartment building, the Miami sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Thank you, she said as the bus approached with a wheeze of hydraulic brakes. For tonight. For choosing me. Thank you for being worth choosing. As the bus pulled away, carrying Sophia toward another day of work and worry and small miracles, Alexander stood on the empty sidewalk and realized that everything had changed again. He was no longer just a man who watched a beautiful woman cross his lobby every morning. He was a man in love with someone who was finally learning that she deserved to be loved back. But as he drove home through the quiet streets of Miami, one thought nagged at him. How long could this fragile, perfect thing between them survive in a world that demanded he choose between being the CEO everyone expected him to be and being the man Sophia was helping him discover he wanted to become? The answer, he feared, would come sooner than either of them was ready. The moment you introduce the person you love to your real life is when everything becomes terrifyingly real. Isabella Martinez was 12 years old, 4 feet 11 inches tall, and had inherited her older sister's expressive brown eyes along with a stubborn streak that could power half of Miami. When Sophia mentioned that she'd been seeing someone, Isabella's interrogation skills would have made FBI agents proud. What's his name? Isabella asked, perched on their tiny apartment's kitchen counter while Sophia made breakfast before her morning shift. Alexander. Alexander what? Alexander Hayes. What does he do? Sophia hesitated, flipping the scrambled eggs in their dented frying pan. How do you explain to a 12-year-old that the man you're falling in love with could buy their entire apartment building without checking his bank balance? He works in business, she said finally. What kind of business? Urban development, building things that make cities better. Isabella's eyes narrowed with the suspicion only a preteen could muster. Is he nice to you? Very nice. Does he know you have a little sister who will hurt him if he's mean to you? Sophia laughed, ruffling Isabella's dark curls. Not yet. But maybe it's time he found out. That evening, after her shift at Café Luna, Sophia found Alexander waiting outside with 2 cups of coffee and a nervous expression that made him look younger than his 36 years. You look like you're about to throw up, she observed, accepting the coffee gratefully. I might. I've been thinking about what you said last night about wanting me to meet Isabella. What if she hates me? She won't hate you. What if she thinks I'm too old for you? Alexander, you're 12 years older than me. Not 20, and age is just a number when 2 people care about each other. What if she thinks I'm some rich guy trying to take advantage of her sister? Sophia stopped walking and turned to face him. Are you? Some rich guy trying to take advantage of me? You know I'm not. Then Isabella will figure that out too. She's smart and she's protective, but she's also 12. Bring her something with sugar in it and you'll be halfway to winning her over. 20 minutes later, they stood outside the Martinez apartment. A small 2-bedroom unit in a complex that had seen better decades. The paint was peeling, the hallway smelled like old carpet and cooking oil, and the elevator had an out-of-order sign that looked permanent. This is it, Sophia said, suddenly self-conscious about the difference between Alexander's world and hers. It's perfect, he said, and meant it. Sophia unlocked the door to reveal Isabella sprawled on their threadbare couch, homework spread around her like a paper explosion. She looked up as they entered, her brown eyes immediately zeroing in on Alexander with laser focus. So, you're the business guy, she said without preamble. And you're the little sister I've heard so much about, Alexander replied, pulling a small white bag from his jacket pocket. I brought chocolate chip cookies from a bakery downtown. Sophia mentioned you like chocolate. Isabella's expression didn't change, but Sophia noticed her sister's eyes linger on the bakery bag. What kind of business? I help plan how cities grow and change, like figuring out where to put new parks or how to make neighborhoods safer and more comfortable for families. Do you make a lot of money doing that? Isabella, Sophia warned, but Alexander held up a hand. It's okay. Yes, I make a lot of money. How much? Enough that I never have to worry about paying rent or buying groceries. Isabella considered this with the seriousness of someone who had spent her entire conscious life aware that money was always tight. Are you going to try to give Sophia money? Isabella? No, Alexander said firmly. Your sister is independent and strong, and she wouldn't want my money even if I offered it. Which I wouldn't, because that's not what this is about. Then what is it about? Alexander looked at Sophia, then back at Isabella. It's about the fact that your sister is the most amazing person I've ever met, and I'm hoping she'll let me be part of her life. Both of your lives, if you're okay with that. Isabella studied him for a long moment, then made a decision that would have surprised anyone who didn't know her. Okay, but I have rules. Shoot. First, you can't hurt her. If you hurt her, I'll figure out a way to hurt you back, even if you are bigger than me. Fair enough. Second, you can't try to change her. She's perfect the way she is. I agree completely. Third, you have to understand that she's the most important person in my world. And if I have to choose between you and her, I'll choose her every time. Alexander felt something tighten in his throat. I wouldn't want it any other way. She's the most important person in my world, too. Isabella's stern expression cracked slightly. Really? Really? Can I have a cookie now? As Isabella demolished the cookies and chattered about her day at school, Sophia watched Alexander navigate questions about everything from his favorite color to whether he knew any celebrities. He answered each question with the same serious attention he probably gave to board meetings, never talking down to Isabella or treating her like a child who couldn't understand complexity. When Isabella excused herself to finish homework, Alexander helped Sophia with the dishes in their tiny kitchen, his expensive suit jacket draped over a chair that had probably come from a garage sale. She likes you, Sophia said, handing him a dish to dry. How can you tell? She shared her cookies with you. Isabella doesn't share cookies with anyone. She's amazing, Sophia. You've raised an incredible kid. We raised each other, Sophia corrected. Some days I think she's the adult and I'm the kid who has no idea what she's doing. Alexander set down the dish towel and turned to face her fully. Can I tell you something? Watching you with her tonight, seeing how much you love each other, how much you've sacrificed for each other, it makes me understand why you're so careful with your heart. She's not just your sister, she's your whole world. She is. And now you're mine. The words hung in the kitchen air, heavy with meaning and possibility and the weight of a future neither of them had dared to imagine a month ago. From the living room, Isabella called out, "Are you guys being gross in there? Because I can hear you being mushy." Sophia laughed, her cheeks flushing pink. "We're just doing dishes." "Good, because I'm not ready for that level of romance in my house." As Alexander prepared to leave, Isabella appeared in the doorway with a serious expression. "Alexander?" "Yeah, thank you for making my sister smile more. She's been sad for a long time, but she's been different since she met you. Happier." Alexander felt his chest tighten with emotion. "Thank you for trusting me with her. Just don't mess it up, okay? I'll do my best." As the door closed behind him, Alexander stood in the hallway of the apartment complex, looking at the peeling paint and the broken elevator, and thinking that he'd never been anywhere that felt more like home. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who show us exactly how fragile happiness can be. For 3 weeks, Sophia Martinez had been living in what felt like a beautiful dream. Alexander would meet her after her shifts at Cafe Luna, walking her to the bus stop and talking until the last possible moment. They'd stolen afternoons at small parks where Isabella could play while they sat on weathered benches, sharing stories and comfortable silences. On Sunday mornings, he'd bring breakfast to their apartment, and Isabella would regale him with dramatic retellings of middle school social dynamics, while Sophia watched the two most important people in her life fall into an easy rhythm. But on this particular Tuesday evening, as Sophia finished her cleaning shift at Meridian Tower, she noticed something different in the lobby. The usual bustle had been replaced by an almost electric tension, and the security guards kept glancing toward the elevators with barely concealed excitement. "Big day tomorrow," one of them mentioned as she passed. "Board meeting to decide the new chairman, whole building's buzzing about it." Sophia felt a flutter of worry. Alexander had mentioned being busy with work lately, but he'd been vague about the details. As she rode the service elevator down to change out of her uniform, she tried to push away the nagging feeling that something was about to change. She was walking through the parking garage toward the bus stop when she heard familiar voices echoing off the concrete walls. Ducking behind a parked car, she saw Alexander standing near his sleek black sedan, speaking with 2 men in expensive suits. "The vote tomorrow is crucial, Alexander. one of them was saying. The board is split and there are still questions about your judgment. My judgment? Alexander's voice carried an edge Sophia had never heard before. Come on, Hayes. You walked out of the Henderson crisis meeting. You've been distracted for weeks. Some people are wondering if you're still committed to this company. My commitment to Hayes Urban Innovation has never been stronger. Then prove it, the second man said. The board needs to see that you're focused on what matters. No distractions, no personal complications, just business. Personal complications? Alexander's tone had gone dangerously quiet. Word gets around, Alexander. People have seen you with the cleaning girl. They're starting to talk. Sophia felt the world tilt sideways. Cleaning girl. The casual dismissal in the man's voice hit her like a physical blow. Her name is Sophia Martinez, Alexander said, his voice steel cold. And what I do in my personal time is nobody's business but mine. Actually, it is our business, the first man replied. You're up for chairman tomorrow. Every decision you make reflects on this company. Dating the help isn't exactly the image we want to project. Dating the help. Alexander repeated the word slowly as if tasting something bitter. Look, we're not saying she's not a nice girl, but she cleans toilets for a living, Alexander. You're about to become chairman of a billion-dollar corporation. Think about what that looks like. Sophia pressed her back against the car, her chest tight with humiliation and pain. She wanted to walk away, to spare herself whatever came next, but her feet seemed rooted to the concrete. What it looks like, Alexander said carefully, is a successful man who's found someone who makes him happy. Happiness is a luxury you can't afford right now, the second man said. The board wants stability, focus, commitment to the company above all else. They want the Alexander Hayes who built this empire, not the one who's been playing house with the cleaning staff. There was a long silence. Sophia held her breath, waiting for Alexander to defend her, to tell these men that she was more than her job, that what they had together mattered more than board votes and corporate images. Instead, she heard him say very quietly, I understand your concerns. Good. So you'll handle it. Another pause. Then, yes, I'll handle it. Excellent. We'll see you at the board meeting tomorrow. And Alexander, make sure there are no more distractions. Sophia heard car doors slamming, engines starting, the sound of expensive vehicles leaving the garage. She stayed hidden behind the car until she was sure they were gone, her heart hammering against her ribs and her eyes burning with unshed tears. When she finally emerged, Alexander was leaning against his sedan, his head in his hands. He looked up as her footsteps echoed in the empty garage, and the expression on his face, guilt, regret, and something that looked like defeat, told her everything she needed to know. Sophia. Her name came out like a prayer. How long were you standing there? Long enough. Her voice was steady, which surprised them both. Long enough to hear that I'm a distraction, a complication, the cleaning girl who's been making you look bad. That's not... They don't understand, don't they? Sophia stepped closer and Alexander could see tears threatening to spill over. Because from where I was standing, it sounded like they understood perfectly. I'm beneath you, Alexander. We both know it, they know it, and apparently everyone in your world knows it too. That's not true, isn't it? I clean toilets for a living. You're about to become chairman of a billion-dollar corporation. When you put it like that, it sounds pretty ridiculous, doesn't it? Sophia, please. You told them you'd handle it. Her voice broke slightly on the last words. What does that mean, Alexander? How exactly are you planning to handle me? Alexander opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Because the truth was, he didn't know. He loved Sophia more than he'd ever loved anything in his life, but he also understood exactly what those men had been telling him. The board would never accept a chairman who was romantically involved with someone they saw as so far below his social status. I need to think, he said finally. I need time to figure out how to make this work. No, you don't. Sophia's voice was soft, but firm. You need to choose. And we both know what choice you're going to make. Sophia, don't. She backed away from him, tears finally spilling over. Don't make this harder than it has to be. You have a life to live, a company to run, a future that doesn't include someone like me. I get it. I always knew this was temporary. That's not true. What we have isn't temporary. It is now. Sophia wiped her tears with the back of her hand, straightening her shoulders in that way Alexander had come to recognize, the way she made herself strong when everything was falling apart. Goodbye, Alexander. Good luck with your board meeting tomorrow. She turned and walked toward the bus stop, her footsteps echoing in the empty garage. Alexander watched her go, every instinct screaming at him to run after her, to fight for what they had, to choose love over ambition. But his feet remained planted exactly where they were, and Sofia Martinez walked out of his life just as quietly as she'd entered it. Only this time, the silence she left behind felt like the end of everything that mattered. Sometimes getting everything you thought you wanted shows you exactly what you've lost. Alexander Hayes stood at the head of the polished mahogany table in the Hayes Urban Innovation Boardroom, accepting congratulations from 12 of Miami's most powerful executives. The vote had been unanimous. He was now chairman of the board, the youngest in the company's history. Everything he'd worked toward for the past decade was finally his. So why did victory taste like ashes in his mouth? "Congratulations, Alexander," said Richard Westbrook, the silver-haired board member who'd led the campaign for his promotion. "I knew you'd make the right choice." The right choice. Alexander's jaw tightened as he shook hands and accepted backslaps from men who measured success in stock prices and quarterly reports. 3 days had passed since Sofia walked away from him in that parking garage, and he hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since. "We should celebrate," suggested Patricia Thornton, the board's only female member. "Dinner at the Miami Club? I can have my assistant make reservations." "Rain check," Alexander said, forcing a smile. "I have some things to wrap up." What he had was a desperate need to get out of this room filled with people who thought they knew what was best for him. As the board members filed out, discussing strategy and expansion plans, Alexander remained at the window, looking down at the lobby 36 floors below. It was 2:47 p.m. Sofia would be starting her cleaning shift right about now, if she was still working at Meridian Tower. For all he knew, she'd quit rather than face the humiliation of seeing him every day. "Sir?" Jameson appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. "The Henderson Group called. They want to reschedule the merger meeting you walked out on. Apparently they're willing to come back to the table." "Schedule it," Alexander said without turning around. "Also, there's been a situation with the cleaning staff." Alexander spun around. "What kind of situation?" "Well, it seems one of the cleaning supervisors made some inappropriate comments to one of the employees. Something about her knowing her place and not getting ideas above her station. The employee in question submitted a formal complaint this morning." Alexander's blood ran cold. "Which employee?" Jameson consulted his tablet. "Sofia Martinez, building maintenance. She's requesting a transfer to our downtown location." The room seemed to tilt around Alexander. Sofia wasn't just avoiding him. She was running from the aftermath of what their relationship had cost her. Someone had made her feel small, had reminded her of exactly what those board members thought about the cleaning girl. "Where is she now?" Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. "I believe she's on the 5th floor, sir. But Mr. Hayes, I should mention that HR is handling the situation." Alexander was already out the door. He found Sofia in the break room on the 5th floor, sitting alone at a small table with a cup of coffee growing cold in front of her. She was staring out the window at the Miami skyline, and Alexander could see the exhaustion in the slope of her shoulders, the way her long black hair fell like a curtain around her face. She looked up when he entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Her brown eyes held no anger, no accusation, just a deep sadness that made Alexander's chest ache. "Congratulations," she said quietly. "I heard about the promotion. Chairman of the board. That's what you wanted, right?" "Sofia, I'm transferring to the downtown building," she said, cutting him off gently. "It'll be easier for everyone this way. No more complications, no more distractions." Alexander sat down across from her, not caring that anyone could walk in and see the new chairman having coffee with a maintenance worker. "I heard about what happened, about what someone said to you. It's fine. People talk. I'm used to it. You shouldn't have to be used to it. And I should have—" He stopped, running his hands through his hair. "I should have defended you. In that parking garage, when they called you a complication, I should have told them that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. But you didn't." "No, I didn't. And I've been trying to figure out why." Sofia finally met his eyes. "You don't need to figure it out, Alexander. I already know why. Tell me." "Because they were right." Her voice was steady, matter of fact. "I am a complication for you. I am beneath your social status. I am exactly what they said I was. The cleaning girl who forgot her place. That's not—" "It is." Sofia leaned forward slightly. "And you know what? I'm okay with that. I know who I am. I know what I'm worth. And I know that what we had was real, even if it couldn't last." Alexander felt something breaking inside his chest. "It could last. If you what?" Give up your career? Walk away from everything you've built? Disappoint everyone who's counting on you? Sophia shook her head. I would never ask you to do that. And you shouldn't ask yourself to do it either. So that's it? We just give up? We accept reality. Sophia stood up, smoothing down her gray uniform. You're chairman of the board now. You have responsibilities, obligations, a life that doesn't include someone like me. And I have Isabella to think about. A life to build that doesn't depend on anyone else. Sophia, wait. Alexander stood too, desperation creeping into his voice. What if there was another way? What if I could make this work? She paused at the door, looking back at him with those expressive brown eyes that had haunted his thoughts for months. You want to know what the sad part is? She said softly. For a few weeks there, you made me believe that I deserved to be loved by someone like you. You made me feel like I was worth choosing. You are worth choosing. Then why didn't you choose me? The question hung in the air between them, unanswered and unanswerable. Because the truth was, when it mattered most, when the choice was put in front of him clearly and starkly, Alexander had chosen his career over his heart. I have to go, Sophia said finally. Isabella has a school play tonight, and I promised I'd be there early to help with her costume. As the door closed behind her, Alexander remained standing in the empty break room, chairman of the board of a billion-dollar corporation, and the loneliest man in Miami. His phone buzzed with a text from Richard Westbrook. Dinner tonight to celebrate? You've earned this, Alexander. You're finally free to focus on what really matters. Alexander stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, what really matters, just walked out the door. But he didn't send it. Instead, he deleted the text and typed, rain check, still wrapping things up. As he rode the elevator back up to his corner office, Alexander realized that success without Sophia felt exactly like failure with a better view. The most important moments in life rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly, demanding everything you thought you knew about who you are. 2 weeks had passed since Sophia Martinez transferred to the downtown Hayes Urban Innovation Building, and Alexander Hayes was discovering that being chairman of the board felt remarkably like being trapped in a golden cage. His days blurred together in an endless cycle of meetings, conference calls, and decisions that affected thousands of people's lives, but left him feeling completely empty. It was 3:17 a.m. on a rainy Thursday when his phone rang, jolting him awake in his penthouse apartment that suddenly felt more like a mausoleum than a home. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Hello? His voice was rough with sleep. Mr. Hayes? This is Dr. Caroline Foster from Miami Children's Hospital. I'm calling about Isabella Martinez. You're listed as an emergency contact. Alexander's blood turned to ice. What happened? Is she okay? She was brought in an hour ago with severe respiratory distress. We've stabilized her, but she's asking for you. Her sister is here, but, Mr. Hayes, the family doesn't have insurance, and the treatment Isabella needs is extensive. Money isn't an issue, Alexander said, already reaching for his clothes. Do whatever she needs. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The pediatric ICU at Miami Children's Hospital was a world of hushed voices, beeping machines, and the kind of fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and frightened. Alexander found Sophia sitting in a plastic chair outside Isabella's room, still wearing her Café Luna apron over jeans, her long black hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and the relief that flooded her brown eyes was quickly replaced by confusion. What are you doing here? She whispered. You listed me as an emergency contact. Alexander sat down beside her, noting the way her hands trembled slightly. How is she? Pneumonia. They said it got bad fast because she's been fighting a virus for weeks, but we couldn't afford to take her to the doctor until... Sophia's voice broke. Until she couldn't breathe. Alexander felt something tear inside his chest. Sophia, I know what you're thinking. That this wouldn't have happened if I'd accepted help, if I'd let you take care of us. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But I can't live that way, Alexander. I can't be someone who needs rescuing. You're not someone who needs rescuing. You're someone who deserves support. Through the window of Isabella's room, they could see the 12-year-old sleeping, her small frame dwarfed by machines and IV lines. A nurse was checking her vitals, and the steady beep of the heart monitor provided an oddly comforting rhythm. She asked for you, Sophia said quietly. When they brought her in and she could barely breathe, she said, Call Alexander. He'll know what to do. She said that. She likes you. More than likes you. She trusts you. Do you know how rare that is for her? For either of us? Alexander stood up and walked to the window, looking at Isabella's sleeping form. When my mom got sick when I was 15, we didn't have insurance either. I watched her suffer because we couldn't afford the treatment she needed. I swore that if I ever had the power to prevent someone else from going through that, Alexander Tun, marry me. The words came out so quietly that Sophia wasn't sure she'd heard them correctly. What? Alexander turned to face her, and she could see something fierce and determined in his eyes. The same expression he probably wore in boardrooms when he was closing impossible deals. Marry me, Sophia. Not because you need rescuing, not because I want to fix your problems, but because I'm completely lost without you. Because the past 2 weeks have been the worst of my life. Because I love you and Isabella more than I love my career, my reputation, or what anyone else thinks. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything. Alexander knelt down in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. I know this is crazy. I know the timing is terrible. But sitting in board meetings, making decisions about buildings and contracts and money, none of it means anything if I can't come home to you at the end of the day. Sophia stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Alexander, your career will survive, or it won't. But I won't survive losing you again. He squeezed her hands gently. I spent 2 weeks trying to convince myself that what we had wasn't worth fighting for, that it was easier to let you go than to deal with the complications. But you know what I realized? What? Love is supposed to be complicated. It's supposed to challenge everything you think you know about yourself. It's supposed to make you choose between who you were and who you could become. And who do you want to become? A man who chooses love over fear. A man who fights for the people who matter. A man who deserves someone like you. Sophia pulled her hands free and stood up, pacing to the window where Isabella lay sleeping. You're asking me to marry you in a hospital hallway at 3 in the morning while my sister is fighting pneumonia. I'm asking you to marry me because life is unpredictable and fragile and short, and I don't want to waste another day pretending that my life means anything without you in it. What about the board? What about your image? What about everything those men said about dating the cleaning girl? Alexander stood and walked to her, gently turning her to face him. Let me tell you what I told the board yesterday when they asked why I'd been distracted lately. You told them about me? I told them that I'd fallen in love with a woman who works 3 jobs to take care of her little sister. A woman who's stronger than anyone I've ever met, who's taught me what real courage looks like. I told them that if loving her makes me a worse CEO, then maybe I was never cut out for the job in the first place. Alexander. And you know what Richard Westbrook said? He said that any man smart enough to recognize that kind of woman is exactly the kind of leader this company needs. Sophia searched his face for any sign of doubt, any hint that he was making this decision in the emotional chaos of the moment. Instead, she saw the same steady determination that had built a billion-dollar empire, now focused entirely on her. You're sure? She whispered. I'm sure that I love you. I'm sure that I want to spend my life with you and Isabella. I'm sure that everything else is just details we can figure out together. From behind them came a weak voice. Are you guys being gross out there? Because I can hear you being mushy even with this oxygen mask on. They turned to see Isabella awake, her brown eyes bright despite her pale complexion. A nurse was checking her IV, smiling at the reunion happening outside her room. How long have you been awake? Sophia asked, rushing to the window. Long enough to hear Alexander ask you to marry him. Isabella's voice was muffled by the oxygen mask, but her eyes were sparkling with mischief. And long enough to know that if you say no, I'm going to be really mad at you. Isabella, Sophia, he came to the hospital at 3 in the morning. He called you the love of his life. He basically told a bunch of rich people that you're more important than money. Isabella looked at Alexander through the window and gave him a weak thumbs up. If you don't marry him, I will. In 6 years when I'm legal. Despite everything, the hospital, the fear, the overwhelming enormity of what Alexander was asking, Sophia laughed. You're 12, and I'm smart enough to know that people like Alexander don't come along very often. People who see who you really are and love you for it. Sophia looked from Isabella to Alexander, seeing her whole future balanced on the edge of this moment. She could say no, protect herself from the possibility of more heartbreak, keep living the careful, controlled life she'd built. Or she could say yes, and jump into something that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Alexander's voice was barely audible. Okay, I'll marry you. But I have conditions. Anything. I keep working. Maybe not 3 jobs, but I keep contributing. I'm not going to be some trophy wife who shops and gets her nails done. Deal. And Isabella stays with us. Always. She's part of this package. Non-negotiable. I wouldn't want it any other way. And if your board doesn't like it, if your career suffers because of us, then we'll figure it out together. Alexander pulled her into his arms, holding her like he'd never let go again. Together, Sophia. That's the point. From her hospital bed, Isabella called out weakly, "Can you guys get married now? Because this is the most romantic thing I've ever seen, and I want to be the flower girl while I still look dramatic and pale." And for the first time in 2 weeks, the sound of laughter filled the spaces where fear and doubt had been living, promising that sometimes the most important choices are the ones that feel less like decisions and more like coming home. 2 years later, some love stories don't end. They just begin again, deeper and stronger, every single day. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Hayes family home in Coral Gables, casting golden patterns across the hardwood floors. Sophia Hayes stood in the kitchen, her wedding ring catching the light as she flipped pancakes on the griddle, humming softly to herself. Her long black hair was pulled back in a loose braid, and she wore one of Alexander's old Harvard t-shirts over pajama shorts. "Something smells incredible," Alexander said, appearing in the doorway with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. Even after 2 years of marriage, the sight of Sophia in their kitchen, still made his chest tighten with gratitude. "Isabella's request," Sophia replied, not turning around but smiling when she felt his arms wrap around her waist from behind. "Chocolate chip pancakes for her last day of 8th grade. And where is our almost high schooler? Getting ready for her final presentation. She's been practicing her speech about urban development and social responsibility for weeks." Sophia leaned back against his chest. "I wonder where she got that topic idea." Alexander chuckled, pressing a kiss to the side of her neck. "Can't imagine." The sound of thundering footsteps on the stairs announced Isabella's arrival before she burst into the kitchen, her dark curls bouncing and her arms full of poster boards and index cards. "Okay, I need you both to listen to my presentation one more time," she announced, spreading her materials across the breakfast bar. "And Alexander, you have to promise to give me honest feedback, not stepfather feedback." "There's a difference?" Alexander asked, accepting the cup of coffee Sophia handed him. "Stepfather feedback is when you tell me everything is perfect because you love me. Honest feedback is when you tell me how to make it better because you believe in me." Alexander and Sophia exchanged a look over Isabella's head. At 14, she was already showing signs of the sharp intelligence and fierce determination that ran in the Martinez family. "Honest feedback it is," Alexander said solemnly. "Hit me with your best shot." As Isabella launched into her presentation about how urban development could address income inequality, Alexander found himself marveling at the life they'd built together. The girl who had once interrogated him about his intentions toward her sister was now passionate about the work he did, often spending weekends in his home office, asking questions about city planning and social impact. "So in conclusion," Isabella said, wrapping up her presentation with a flourish, "responsible urban development isn't just about building things. It's about building communities where everyone has a chance to thrive." "Brilliant," Sophia said, applauding. "You're going to knock them dead." "Alexander," Isabella looked at him expectantly. "Honest feedback, remember? Your research is solid, your arguments are compelling, and your passion comes through clearly," Alexander said thoughtfully. "But you want to know what's going to make this presentation truly exceptional?" "What?" "The fact that you're not just talking about theories, you're talking about your own experience. You understand what it feels like to worry about rent and groceries and medical bills. That authenticity is going to resonate with people in a way that statistics never could." Isabella beamed. "Thanks, both of you, for helping me understand that where I come from isn't something to be ashamed of, it's something that makes me stronger." As Isabella gathered her materials and headed off to school, Alexander and Sophia settled at the breakfast bar with their coffee, savoring the quiet moment before their own busy days began. "You know what I was thinking about this morning?" Sophia said, curling her legs up under her. "What's that?" "That elevator. The day we got stuck between floors." She smiled, her brown eyes sparkling with the memory. "If someone had told me that getting trapped in a broken elevator would lead to all this, I would have thought they were crazy." "Best mechanical failure of my life," Alexander agreed. "Though I have to admit I was hoping to get stuck in that elevator long before it actually happened." "Really? I used to take the service elevator sometimes hoping I'd run into you. Never worked up the courage to actually say anything, though." Sophia laughed. "You were stalking me through the building's elevator system? I prefer to think of it as strategic positioning. My husband, the romantic, Alexander grew quiet for a moment, looking at his wife in the morning light. Do you ever regret it? Giving up the life you had planned for the chaos of being married to me? Sophia considered the question seriously, as she always did. It was one of the things Alexander loved most about her. She never gave easy answers to hard questions. I never had a life planned, she said finally. I had survival strategies. I had contingency plans. I had ways to get through each day without falling apart. She reached over and took his hand. What I have now isn't chaos, Alexander. It's life. Real, messy, complicated, beautiful life. Even when the board meetings run late and I miss dinner. Even then. Even when Isabella practices her violin at 6 in the morning. Even then. Even when my mother calls and accidentally mentions that her friend's sons are all doctors and lawyers. Especially then. Sophia grinned. Your mother loves me now and you know it. It was true. Margaret Hayes had been skeptical at first, but Sophia's quiet strength and genuine warmth had won her over completely. Now she bragged to her bridge club about her daughter-in-law, who was studying for her nursing degree while running a small catering business on the side. Speaking of which, Alexander said, checking his watch, don't you have that final exam today? Pharmacology. 2 hours of pure terror. Sophia had enrolled in nursing school 6 months after their wedding, determined to build a career that mattered to her. But after today, I'm officially a registered nurse. I'm so proud of you, even though it means I'll be working night shifts at the hospital, even though it means I'll have to learn to sleep without you next to me 3 nights a week. Alexander brought her hand to his lips, kissing her wedding ring. I'm proud of you for following your dreams. All of them. The sound of Alexander's phone buzzing interrupted the moment. He glanced at the screen and sighed. Emergency board meeting, Sophia guessed. Crisis in the San Francisco office. I need to be there in an hour. 2 years ago, this would have been the moment when everything fell apart, when work demanded that Alexander choose between his career and his personal life. But they'd learned to navigate these moments together. Go, Sophia said, standing up and straightening his tie. Handle whatever crisis needs handling. I'll be here when you get back. What if I don't get back until late? Then I'll heat up dinner and we'll eat together at midnight. She kissed him softly. That's what marriage is, remember? Showing up for each other, even when the timing isn't perfect. As Alexander prepared to leave for his emergency meeting, he found himself thinking about the man he'd been before Sophia and Isabella came into his life. That man had measured success in stock prices and board votes, had eaten dinner alone while reviewing contracts, had convinced himself that work was enough. Now he measured success in different ways. The sound of Isabella's laughter when she beat him at chess, the way Sophia's face lit up when she talked about her patients, the quiet moments like this morning when his life felt full of purpose beyond profit margins. Alexander? Sophia called from the kitchen as he reached for his keys. Yeah? I love you. All of you. The CEO, the stepfather, the husband, the man who still watches me cross lobbies even though I'm coming home to him every night. How did you know I still do that? Because I watch you too. Every morning when you think I'm not looking, you watch me leave for school like you're memorizing the moment. I am memorizing it. Every single day. That evening, Alexander returned home to find Sophia at the kitchen table, still in her scrubs, with textbooks spread around her and a stethoscope draped around her neck. She looked up when he entered, her face tired but glowing with accomplishment. How did the exam go? He asked, kissing the top of her head. I passed. Her voice was quiet, almost disbelieving. I'm officially a registered nurse. I knew you would be. I couldn't have done it without you. Without this. She gestured around their home, their life, without knowing that I had somewhere safe to fall if I failed. You were never going to fail, Sophia, but I'm glad you felt safe enough to try. Later that night, as they lay in bed with Isabella's soft violin practice drifting down from upstairs and the Miami skyline twinkling through their bedroom windows, Alexander reflected on the journey that had brought them here. They'd faced challenges, board members who questioned his judgment, media attention that made Sophia uncomfortable, the constant balancing act of blending their very different worlds. But they'd faced them together, and that had made all the difference. What are you thinking about? Sophia asked, curled against his side. Just this. Us. How different everything is from what I thought I wanted. Better or worse? Infinitely better. Alexander tightened his arms around her. I used to think success meant having everything under control. Now I think it means having people worth losing control for. Very philosophical for a CEO. Very philosophical for a man who's learned that the best things in life happen when you stop planning and start living. As they drifted off to sleep, Alexander's last conscious thought was the same one he'd had every night for 2 years. Somewhere in this city, there were people working late shifts and worrying about rent and taking care of family members, just as Sophia once had. And tomorrow, he would go to work and try to build a world where more of those stories could have happy endings. Because that's what love had taught him, that the point of having power isn't to elevate yourself above others, but to lift others up alongside you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the person you lift up turns out to be the one who teaches you how to fly. What would you have done in Alexander's position? Would you have chosen love over career expectations, or would the pressure have been too much? This story reminds us that real love isn't about grand gestures. It's about choosing each other every single day, even when the world tells you that your choices don't make sense. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones where two people from different worlds decide that their love is strong enough to build a new world together. Your participation in our channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.